September. I'm Kevin Horn. With me here tonight is a guest that brings a lot to the table for people that are trying to understand what's going on in politics here in Oregon and in state legislative politics, and particularly with the Senate. Bryan Iverson, who is the head of the Republican Leadership Fund for the Senate Caucus and a top advisor here, a strategic advisor to Senate Leader Tim Knopp. Bryan, welcome to the program here tonight.
Thanks, Kevin. It's good to be here. It's been all of a week and a half since we were at the Reagan dinner. So
I know, and it feels like there's been a series of these great events that have happened. I've gotten to see, and I've got to talk to you for about 13 seconds, and then promised to get back with you. So I did. What do you know?
Grabbed a couple of photos. Yeah. No, it was a great event. That was a fun time.
Well, and it seems to be indicative of what we're experiencing on the Republican side, which is that things seem to be gaining a little bit of momentum here. I'm not going to complain. Pretty good.
Well, we still have Biden mounting the ship, so that part always helps. I don't think there's been anything good off the national stage, but I think, statewide, I of course work for Republicans, so I feel pretty bullish. I think we have a super strong governor candidate. I think we have two congressional candidates, three. Throw Scarlettos in there too as well. Those three congressional candidates, 4, 5, and 6, look super promising. I'm just stoked with those guys and what they're doing, and then that just kind of translates itself further down in our state Senate races, and then of course our House races that are kind of following the thread of everything out there, and all the issues that voters care about. They're issues that Republicans lead on, Republicans win on. So it's what else is there not to be excited about?
Well, so before we kind of start walking through some of the races, which I know we want to go through those and let people know just how pretty positive the news is here as to what is happening in the state. That was one of the stories here. Today, there was a story that said that test scores have cratered in the state of Oregon with regard to math and English. And I don't know if we're surprised about that, but this seems to be one of those symptoms that tells us that parents and anybody who cares about the children that are being educated in our public school system have been looking at that issue differently than they used to. It used to be a Democrat issue, right? And that's just like you were saying, some of these are now, when we talk about them, are trending Republican because we have something to say and they really want to hear it.
Oh, well, yeah, you're spot on. It definitely wasn't. And here's my take on it. I think it's a little bit different. So this education used to always be about spending. The Democrats always kept saying, we need to spend more, we need to spend more. Graduation rates aren't good because we're not spending enough. There's not enough teachers, and, there's too many kids in the classroom, and it was all about spending. And so they came out and gave us the cat tax, right? That we fought against, and that was all $2 billion going to spending. We go to the legislature. The Republicans say, yeah, let's fund education first. We're good with that. Let's give you, I don't know, 9.3 billion, I think, something like that. Republicans actually proposed to spend more than the Democrats on education. So spending's not the problem. You can't make that argument that there's not enough money. So what's changed? Well, I think the culture's changed. I think that parents are seeing that the liberal Democrats are trying to turn it into a factory for breeding new liberals. And so they've changed the criteria of education, and they've moved it from reading, writing, arithmetic, that sort of stuff, and try to make it more about CRT and, identity politics and all the stuff that they do on the national level. They're just trying to do inside our schools. And I think parents are really I think COVID exposed a lot of that, because I think a lot of parents were watching their kids' stuff on Zoom, and they're like, you're learning what? Or, so all of a sudden we had to become, I think, as parents, more engaged with our kids' education through COVID. And now coming out of that, we're starting to see all of this stuff. And parents are pissed, and they should be.
Well, and we've been increasing the inputs, and we've even seen declines in enrollment post-COVID here, which is a sign that maybe people are not super pleased with the public education system. Some of those declines have been in the double digits in some of the districts around the state, which is pretty shocking. So that means classroom sizes should be shrinking. Funding is going up,
solve that problem. Yeah, solve that problem. Yeah,
but the
I
outputs
think
are
that,
not improving, right?
no, it's not improving at all. I mean, I live in Prineville, and both my kids now, they're both in high school. I have a junior and a freshman, and my junior, the graduation standards are so low that he's taking like 3 classes right now, and one of them's basketball. And then and it's just he's not being challenged. There's no the requirements, and this is in Prineville. We're a pretty conservative area, so it's not even Portland. And so driving those requirements down and not equipping our kids with the tools they need to be successful when they leave high school, because that was the idea. It's not like you weren't supposed to come out of high school ready to go into the workforce. You're supposed to come out of high school kind of knowing how to learn. So whether that takes you to college or whether that takes you into a trade school, your job where was to have fun, but to know that you need to know how to get an assignment done on time, that you can actually add 2 + 2, and you can write a little bit, and you can fill out an application, and some of those basic things that you need in life to move to the next level. And we're not seeing that, and I think it's an issue that Republicans can own over the next decade. I think is an issue we need to climb into and not shy away from like we've done in the past. And I really hope we do. And you'll see our campaigns weighing into it for sure, because the Democrats will not educate our kids.
And this is like half the state budget, right? It's like half the state budget.
Oh yeah.
Which is,
I'm not a budget. I don't know the exact budget, but yeah, it's over $9 billion. So I'd say that's a chunk of change.
Yeah, and it's been typical to see 8 and 10% increases in a biennium in the education budget. We're not seeing 8 and 10% increases in test scores or high school graduation rates. And this shocking report here about that math test scores in math cratered. The worst hit grade levels were 8th and 11th grade, which is what you were just saying. It's like when you get to those grade levels, that's when it's got to have shown some results, or we've let the kids down severely. Yeah. And you can't come in with, this kind of performance, and yet they want to spend loads of money on facilities and buildings. There's been a lot of property taxes going up. And at the same time, they refuse to lift the 3% charter school cap, which there's just people desperate to get into those charter schools. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that, because I think the OEA is way more important than your kids. Just way more important.
Well, that's what it's all political. It has nothing to do with teaching our kids. It all has to do with political control. So, we know that the Democrats love to be in control, and they love to wield that power, especially the OEA. They're the largest funders to the Democratic cause in Oregon, and so why don't we get to see a 3% the lifting of that? Well, it's because the OEA doesn't want it, and the Democrats that are there aren't going to go against them, because they would primary them in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it's the real veto, right? I know the governor is supposed to have a veto, but the OEA has a massive veto that might be more powerful than the governor at times. Well, this is
see how much the governor how much Tina Kotek's getting from the OEA, and that'll probably tell you where that's going to.
Pretty much tells the story. Follow the money. Yeah. So another thing is, people are really concerned about cost of living in this state and what's been happening to it. It's become a very expensive place to live. I believe the article that I saw here, and I don't have it handy, said that we're in the top 5, maybe number 3 in terms of the most expensive place to buy a home. Which is really, if you can't buy a home, then you have to rent. And then, of course, rents have gone up. So how do people kind of get by? And it doesn't seem to be a top priority for the state government to do anything about this. And I just saw gas prices are now resuming their climb, particularly in the Bend area. That was it's above $5 again in Bend, which that's how people get to and from work, and that's how we get our products and goods and services shipped to us. And this is just not a priority for Democrats, it seems, at all.
No, I think, well, and I think on that, Prineville, it's over. I mean, I drive a truck, right? I have a diesel truck, and most goods are shipped by diesel trucks. They're not shipped by unleaded gasoline cars. So, I mean, it's $5.50 a gallon in Prineville for diesel. So, and Bend is just more. If you can find somebody who actually pumps diesel in Bend, normally you have to get back to Redmond or something before you can find a gas station that even has diesel. And Ben, I think that the inflation is something, even Biden said it the other night that, oh, it's not that bad. I think on 60 Minutes, it's just, if you look at the month over month, it's just inched up. But if people aren't seeing that, I mean, gasoline is one predictor that we see, right? Every week we fill our tank up or whatever, especially if you got a job, and you're driving. Most people drive or commute on some level, but if you look over, year over year, I'm looking at these numbers, and the stuff that people see, like gasoline's up 47%, so it's not 8% inflation, it's 47% inflation with gasoline, and ground beef is up 53.5%.
Unbelievable.
And I got a bunch of these numbers that we've been looking at, and then if you want to go even to the entertainment side, going to a movie's up 24% year over year. So now that COVID's over, you finally get to go to a movie, and now it costs you 25% more to go watch the same movie. And they don't even take into account the price of popcorn. I bet it's probably $10 for a bag of popcorn now. So I think it's
if there's anyone to serve it to you.
Yeah. And inflation is a direct result. I mean, most economists agree inflation is a direct result of government spending, right? And that is really where we're seeing, at least on the goods and services side of the fence. And then the housing side, it really is a supply and demand issue. I mean, there is not enough supply out there. There's not from top to bottom. There's not enough, $500,000 to $800,000 homes, and there's definitely not enough of under $500,000 homes, and there's not enough for starter homes, because you have, in housing. My wife, we own a Windermere franchise here in Prineville, and Vicky's the principal broker, and so we, are pretty involved in housing and what goes on. But you have to have a ladder effect in housing. You have to have a place where young couples start, or a single person, decides they want to buy a home or buy a condo or buy something that they can afford and get into. And then they have to step up from there. And with the housing prices that have gone up because the demand is so high, you've lost that ability to keep up with that supply. And part of that's policy, I think. I think part of that's policy there, that the Democrats love to keep our urban growth boundaries just locked in. They don't allow us to do the other tools that other cities across the country have done, where they've had rapid growth, where nobody really wants sprawl. I don't think even Republicans want, a massive flowing nature of sprawl, but ultimately what we wanted was local control. And the state just, Portland Democrats do not want to give up control of the whole state. They don't want to let Bend even decide how they want to grow without, having some group that's made up mostly of probably Portland Democrats. So one of the board of appeals, or LUBA or DLCD, or you name it, board that has to approve stuff, and they'll say, well, you're moving a little too close to the forest over there, or we don't really like the angle here. So they do years of work, and then they have to come back again and again and again, and all that's going to do is drive up housing. When people want to live in Oregon, it's a great place to live, but that's probably going to change.
Yeah, and I think they also don't seem to appreciate, certainly the people that have been running our state for decades, that different parts of our state are incredibly different from each other. This is, what you do in Portland or even Bend or is completely different than other places where they need industrial development. They need land to be zoned for business, for being able to increase the housing supply, so that there isn't such an increase in the cost of the housing that people want. As you said, it's a state that attracts people and a government that repulses people at the same time.
Well, and the part of that I think we're really missing, and it's, I know homelessness is a big piece of this, but we've been really trying to make the case in a lot of our campaigns that, the one everybody talks about getting people off the streets, and that's, it's important. Drug use is a big part of that, but The one thing we probably could do with policy is stop people from having to move onto the streets out of their homes. And I think
Yeah.
there's ways to do that. And the Democrats thing was rent control, right? So they put in rent control in apartments and those sort of stuff. And so they basically tied landlords' increases to what? Inflation.
Yeah.
So now they've mandated, I think that all the landlords get increased their rent 14% this year because inflation.
Yeah, this
So
is, and they want to solve it by writing people checks too, right? To go alleviate inflation, which doesn't alleviate inflation, it fuels inflation.
yeah.
So
Yeah, if the Democrats are in control, you'll see that in the next session, they are going to put in rent checks for people that, they're just basically going to pay you $600, $700, whatever it is. They'll put that in and say, well, this is how we're solving the rent price problem. And you're like, well, actually, if you just built more apartments and let the marketplace dictate what would happen, I think you would see, rents come back to earth where they were supposed to be driven by market demand. And it's just what has to happen.
yeah, you can't. There's no laws you can pass to repeal the laws of supply and demand. But
Yeah.
many Democrats have tried, and they'll continue to try. There's also a problem in our state with what has been done with what is being referred to as now failure, even in the liberal media, as drug decriminalization. And I just saw an Associated Press article says Oregon's move to decriminalize hard drugs a failure. When the AP admits that, and then you see something in the Oregonian that says something very similar, that the effort sends fewer than 1% of people to treatment, and yet we're pouring gazillions of dollars into this and saying it's our top priority because we know it drives the problem of homelessness, and we know it is actually overwhelming our hospital system. And this is the result of the policy authored by Democrats. This has become big for Republicans to talk about, hasn't it?
Well, again, everything's regional, but I think if you are around Portland, the one thing you don't want is the homeless property crime issues spilling over into your neighborhood. So if you're not living in it, you definitely don't want it spilling into where you live it. So it does really affect, a lot of communities across Oregon because there is homelessness everywhere. And then there's, pockets of super areas where the homelessness and drugs are kind of rampant. And obviously I bet you could follow that with the crime that's happening, and the other crime doesn't even get the property crimes of stuff don't even get reported on because they're not even getting prosecuted and they're not even getting put into the system. So, if a cop stops somebody from shoplifting or, breaking a car window and just stealing whatever was in your car, like we don't even know that stuff's happening. So there's so many things because people aren't even calling the cops for it because the cops will tell them, well, there's nothing we can do.
Or they don't show up. They don't show up either.
No. And just because they don't have the time or the resources to do that. And I think that's just, so we're not even seeing that in the numbers of everything. And I really think that's the undertone that is going to be part of our red wave that's here, that's going to allow us to win some of these races. Is I think that the Democrats don't have an answer for homelessness. I was just working on some slides that I sat through on Oregon Housing Community Services. Their answer is one thing: more money.
Yeah,
that'll solve. That's their answer. And I'm talking to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. And usually it goes to their friends that run these little nonprofits that get paid millions of dollars to, solve homelessness when they haven't been able to solve anything. So, I say, show us one example where you've been successful because it's done nothing but worse and you've been in control for 12 years. You have had super control.
Super control, right?
Since 2012, they've been in control. So at some point, I think the voters have to go. Even Democrats have to go. All right, you're right. They're not in it to solve the problem. They're just in it for whatever power. I don't know, money at the end of the day. Who knows? But I think their desire is there. I just think that. I think everybody has a compassionate desire to solve a problem, and so I don't blame Democrats for that. I just think that they're reasons for wanting to fix it, or what they're putting out there to throw more money at a problem with unproven techniques really just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
So this is a good opportunity to introduce something where they're talking about throwing a lot more money at an issue, and it is the Oregon Universal Healthcare Task Force. This has been talked about a lot by different entities that pay attention to this, that are kind of big watchers of this. And I know this is an issue that we hear about from voters. And again, the Democrats have led all the way on this issue. This is their thing. And they want to have a sort of European style single payer system, just swallow up the entire healthcare system in the state, which, as far as I'm concerned, that sounds like it's going to take away a lot of private insurance, or at least make it subservient to a state-run system. But it's also going to do something else. It's going to result in $22 billion in new taxes. What was I think we said the all funds, or not the all funds, but the state budget right now is somewhere around $20 billion.
Yeah,
that sounds like a lot,
at least doubles our budget. Yeah, I mean, we're sitting here arguing about $9 billion for education, and they want to drop $22 billion on top of that. Well, the two takeaways are: has a task force ever really been successful? I mean, yeah. Let's kind of start there. Like, let's do a task force, because that's the good idea. Said nobody. Then I think the other part of that is like 22, and that's whenever they estimate these things. Of course, the estimates weren't done by Republicans, right? So they're gonna be as conservative as they can possibly be. We've been tracking this thing, and if you really dive into the weeds, well, which I guess is what I'm paid to do, look at somebody like Deb Patterson running against Raquel Moore Green. Deb Patterson has said numerous times that single payer systems and a single payer government system, like a fully funded Medicare, which is free for all, is ultimately what they want. Even if you're a legal alien, doesn't matter. That what they ultimately want is free Medicare. Is it's the only vehicle we have federally to use. But that's really what they're driving towards, is they want, and that the CBO, not even, our task force number, but the CBO out of the federal government said it will cost trillions. But somebody's got to pay for it, and in Oregon, they're just going to pass it on to employers, right? I mean, they got to pay for it. And so we need to push back. We're pushing back hard with the small businesses. Anybody that works for a private business needs to understand, this is just going to cost your employer a bunch more money through mandates, and ultimately that means they can't pay you as much. I mean,
they don't just accept. They don't just decide, well, let's just lose money. They end up having to either raise their prices or find another state to do business in.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can't take on so and a lot of people don't understand, like, Oregon can't take on debt, right? I mean, we can't like the federal government. We can't go print money, and go borrow it from China or whatever, So the state, so they have to find the money to pay for whatever program that they want to put into place, and the only way to do that is to tax people who actually sign, the front of a paycheck. And I think it's the only way to do it, or or employees themselves, and say, look at this great benefit you're going to get, and we're just going to put in this little tax that you'll barely even see, and we'll all pay for it. Will we get something better? I think the jury's kind of spoken on that one. It's not really, single payer systems aren't good for quality healthcare. I think it's, the access usually gets lower. Seniors have a hard time getting to their appointments and stuff because it's just,
or finding doctors who will take them.
Yeah, or finding doctors that'll even take them. So you're right, and I just don't think it's the right move. I don't think it's where Oregonians really want to go. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. And we're pushing back on it. The hard part about healthcare is that everybody wants healthcare and will need healthcare at some point, right, in their life. And so they want it. You want it to be the best and the best possible healthcare you have at the time you need it. but we all don't necessarily want to pay for it. If Kevin really needs it, I really don't want to pay for Kevin's health care, but when it comes to my health care, you should be paying for my health care, and I want the best health care possible. So it is a conundrum, and it's a tough issue to kind of tackle and dive into, but we need to, and we need to take care of where we're really focused on with campaigns is we need to take care of the actual people who take care of patients first. Like, let's get that figured out. There's so many issues with the nurses, with doctors, with the support staff that are in these hospitals. I mean, we need to take care of that issue before we stay here and start having this debate about single payer scenarios. So I really think that's a good pivot for campaigns to really be talking about is saying, COVID exposed a lot of issues with our hospital systems around the state. And those hospital systems, like I'm sure you're aware, I mean, a lot of them are struggling financially.
They're reeling, aren't they? Well, didn't
Yeah.
you guys just the e-board just put forward $40 million of emergency funds to help with ease hospital overcrowding? That sounds like the first thing you should do, not let's go out and see if we can't create a single payer system. And by the way, put the government in charge of managing the supply and demand when the supply is short, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and just for an example, I mean, I'll just use myself. I'm coming up on 48 years old, and I'm like, well, it's probably time to do the old colonoscopy and start that process. So I called we have St. Charles in Central Oregon. It's the only hospital system because they bought all the other private hospitals out. So I called and said, well, I need to get an appointment. I need to get it on the books so that I have to go in to see my doctor. I can't even get in to see her until November 15th. So she can do then a consult to send me off to go get. So if I want to go do preventive medicine, which everybody talks about, I can't even get in there to, if I'm lucky, I'll get my colonoscopy before the end of the year. So, there's demand. I'm waiting to go. I'm ready to pay. And they can't actually make it happen. Yeah. So there's a lot of the things to focus on before we focus on single payer, and it's just going to cost way too much on the backs of Oregonians, and it's just not the right way to go.
There's even an EMS, emergency medical services shortage, which I saw. That's also something that the state is being forced to pay attention to and then rural emergency services are even worse. And it's just like all these things, and they want to transform the system and put a bunch of bureaucrats in charge of it instead of all these entities out there that actually know their businesses better. This is the election where you have a chance to change course and maybe make sure we do the right things to address the system. And a lot of folks are just waking up to this now, but they know. Everybody on our feed has been saying that health insurance costs have been going up. The availability of doctors have been going down. You can't get appointments. And all we need to do is we need to spend more money and put more government in charge of it. What could go wrong with that? Jeez.
Well, and I'll hearken it all the way back to your education thing. And now we're not educating kids to actually make them doctors and nurses and x-ray techs, all that sort of stuff, because we're lowering the bar so badly. What's the ramifications of that? If you have a supply issue, you got to start back and start bringing people into the system, right, to alleviate your supply problem. And so but we're not doing that in Oregon, and that's really a sad state of affairs. And at the end of the day, we have to just beat the drum. Like, they've been in charge. They don't get to say that we were in charge in 18 and 20 and they only won it the last 2 years, so they need more time. Like, no, you've had time. There was no roadblock. There was the vote on the House was 37-23 every time. The vote in the Senate was 18-12 every time. You won every vote you wanted. Republicans did a decent job of some parlor tricks and slowing some things down, walking out when they really needed to, and, trying to hammer some deals out when they had to try to stop this thing because it was worse than that thing. But really, at the end of the day, they've been in control, and we have to remind the public that it's everything that's bad is their fault.
One last issue I wanted to touch upon before we talk campaigns briefly is Senate Republicans call for an audit of the Department of Environmental Quality, and it turns out that the person heading that up just so happened to be relieved of their job the other day, and usually that's an indication that something is screwed up. And it says here, this is an excerpt from a letter that was sent I guess, to Secretary of State Shemia Fagan, who's supposed to be heading up audits and so on. It says the DEQ has long lacked accountability and is frankly a broken agency. These problems have not only persisted but grown worse. The majority party in the Oregon legislature, the governor, and multiple agency heads should be holding DEQ to account, but have instead aggressively expanded the size, scope, and power of this unaccountable agency. This description you could insert for DEQ almost anything in the state government, and is repeated over and over and over. But it's something when even the Democrats feel like someone had to resign because it's that bad. What's the story on that?
I think so. DEQ was grossly expanded. If you remember, the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans in 2020 walked out over cap and trade, because they were going to grossly just expand everything in that scenario. And so the Republicans all walk out. We say, great, we feel like we killed that thing, and you felt pretty good about it. We took a lot of hits, because people don't like walkouts, believe it or not. Voters are not fans of it. So it's a very difficult thing to do politically, especially if you're in a challenging district. It can be a death nail to you politically, because people ultimately want good government. But they come back, after they walk out and they don't do cap and trade dies. The governor just signs executive order after executive order and basically created cap and trade and DEQ. So that's pretty much what she did. And the problem is it's such a bad run agency, they haven't been able to even implement half the stuff that she was told to do.
From some of it, huh?
Yeah, they can't even figure out how to do it, right? And to even make it happen. And even the Betsy Johnson, I'll harken back to her on this one. She's always hammered DEQ. She's been after state agencies ever since I think she's been a senator. And here's a Democrat that has been hammering DEQ for, well over a decade, trying to get audits done there. And it's the one thing they won't audit is DEQ. So that really tells you something's going on.
Yeah.
And she won't audit anything unless it has a political spin on it that, benefits Democrats. So as much as I applaud our approach in pushing those letters and stuff to them, we're not going to see them audit that agency until we take control and we write a bill in that requires audits of every agency every 2 years or 4 years. How about that? Now she's got a state law that she has to follow. So therefore, she can't skirt and just say, well, we were busy doing employment department for the 17th time to tell you that you need a new computer system.
Yeah.
I think
you needed an audit for that.
Yeah, I think any of us could have walked in there and said, hey, you guys are using flip phones. Maybe you need to upgrade your technology.
Yeah.
It's
the
crazy.
people who waited 8 months for an unemployment check after they are unemployed. Maybe you need a new computer system because that just,
I'll leave policy with this. Is both the House and the Senate. They had ledge days last week, which is kind of every quarter they kind of get together and hear ideas and stuff in their committees and things like that when you're a legislator. But the caucuses kind of all got together separately and they started writing an agenda that says we just can't say Democrats are bad at everything, which they, for the most part they are. But, what's our positive agenda? Like, how do we fix it? How do we make things better? And so you'll see here in the next, coming month or so, as this campaigns roll out, these positive agendas, like how we're going to fix inflation, how we're going to fix crime, how we're going to put a bill out there that finally gives school choice a vote of the people. Let's refer that thing to the voters and let's find out once and for all if the money should follow the student or it should follow the bureaucrat. And I'm pretty sure that's a winning issue. So, we're prepared to put those agenda items on the floor, even if it'll be close, regardless of what happens, it's going to be close. Even if we take control 16-14 or we're down or it's tied 15-15 in the Senate and the same on the House, we can tell you it's going to be tight. So, but we can't stop from pushing our agenda because I think they're winning agendas. and so I think we'll hopefully see some of those policies roll out. As the campaign guy, I like nice, big, huge, sexy campaign policy pieces that we can run on and stuff like that. And a lot of the times the policy is, a lot of it's done in the weeds, right? I mean, it's just, you're just down, you're the political wonks just really hammering out language and all that sort of stuff. And that's really going to be where the rubber meets the road. But my job is to get more of them there. So when it comes to voting, we can win a little bit more and lose a little less.
So I think that there's a belief at the national level, even, that Oregon is a place where we might be able to win. The Republican State Leadership Committee, which doesn't always play heavily in Oregon, they are doing that this year. According to Oregonian article, $800,000 is coming in to candidates, and political groups are investing. And we're starting to see this. There's a lot of good press information that's coming out from Zach Kraft. And why don't you walk us through these districts just so people understand? Because I mean, it's 30 people in the Senate, right? That's an example, and we need to have 15 at least to have some control.
Yeah, so 30, 18, 12 right now. 18 was actually more like 18, 11, 1, because Brian Boquist is a registered independent, but he pretty much is a Republican. I mean, I think most people agree he's pretty conservative. So I think there's some issues there. So we hope that he would join our caucus. And so you kind of boil down. And so Senate doesn't run it's every 2 years in the House. The Senate's every 4 years. So only half of them are up for reelection. So, and then with redistricting, and then we had one seat, which was Jeannie Burdick's. So she quit to go take a cush government or governor appointment, on a utility board that pays $200,000 a year. So she left her Senate seat to go take that job. And so that one has to go up for election. So we have 16 seats up for election this cycle in the Senate. And some safe seats for us, some safe seats for Dems, which when we consider a safe seat, plus or minus 15 points, really somewhere in that scenario, where for the most part, people are going to vote. There's the non-affiliated voters pretty much break Democrat if it's a plus 15 or more, and then the Republicans on the other end, the non-affiliated voters pretty much break our way as well. So, and then you kind of take all that away, and look at where we're at with redistricting. We were able to, we believe today, we will pick up Betsy Johnson's seat. That is going to go red. So you look at who we have over there with Suzanne Weber, who's a representative, ran a most expensive House rep seat in the history of Oregon last cycle, and won by a solid 9.5 point margin on the coast in a -6 blue district for us. So that means there's 6% more Democrats registered than Republicans. And then of the total population of that district that's registered. So we feel really good about that one. We actually, in redistricting, picked up a new Senate seat, which is where Representative Wheaton is running, which is the old Lee Byer seat down in we call rural Lane County, pretty much. A little bit of Lynn County as well. It's got some Lebanon and stuff in there. But it's solidly a Republican seat. So the good part is we saved ourselves millions by not having, because otherwise we were going to go after Byer's seat, because it was like Springfield and kind of those areas around Eugene. So we felt that was a move. And then Daniel Bonham should hopefully win in Senate District 26, but that's a hold. So either way, you add up those things, we have 2 pickups, and then we're back at 12. And then we have Senator Thatcher, who's got redistricted. She's still in Kaiser, but she picked up some Courtney's seat, so she's running for re-election. And then Senator Kinnemer is running for re-election up there in Oregon City. That's one area. We feel really that we're going to win those 2 seats. We feel strong. We like where they're positioned. We like that the electorate. Kaiser is taking a turn and decided they wanted to be Republicans because they're blue collar. So we feel really good about that. Same with Oregon City. They said we've had enough of this Portland dumpster fire, and we're going Republican. So we feel really good about those. So that theoretically, if we're able to hold those and spend a bunch of money and beat back the negative comment, and basically just abortion seems to be the only issue they have to run on against those two and call it extreme. And so we have a good shot there. I mean, Kim Thatcher ran a good Secretary of State's race. She's got good name ID. We feel pretty good. So that gets us to 14. So that leaves us with, our last 3 seats that we feel are toss-ups is Raquel Moore Green, South Salem, and Randy Sparacino against Jeff Golden in Medford is another race that we're in solidly. And then up in your neck of the woods, up there in Hillsborough, out west Washington County, Carolina Mamadal is just running one hell of a campaign.
Yeah, she's been really working hard.
She's put herself in a position to win. So, it's a tough registration district there, but we really feel that, the Forest Grove, Cornelius area, and even Hillsborough's really upset with education. I mean, they came really close in flipping that school board.
They did.
Back in 21. And so those are the things that I was kind of looking at when we were playing the numbers and looking at stuff. And, we kind of look at school board elections, at least I did, as a give some insight to the Democrats that are watching. But I looked at school board elections as a way where you could find kind of where the anger points were in the electorate,
Yep.
and avoid those. So, really we got three solid shots at 15-15, right? So, and if we win 2 out of 3, then boom, we're in the majority.
Which is just really amazing.
Yeah, it's unprecedented. We've been, even in 2010, when the House split 30-30 in the last red wave that kind of came through, the Senate I think they fumbled a couple things. I wasn't working in there at the time. I was on the governor's race, but they stayed at 16-14, so they could have easily, I think, gone to 15-15 then. But we feel pretty confident about it. We love where we're at. We're positioned well. The RSLC is kind of seeing what we've seen. They've done their own independent polling. They're not just going to listen to me and Senator Knopp flying over there and saying, "Guys, we can win." And they go, "Yeah, but you're in Oregon. You can't win. You're in Oregon." And then we said, "Well, yeah." We just kind of kept beating that drum, and we kind of kept saying, "You know what? We're looking at this stuff. We're looking at it, and we've recruited the best class of candidates that we've ever had, and we're in 15 out of 16 of those seats. We have candidates, even in places where, we don't think we can win, but we're going to still challenge them. We need to challenge them. And the House recruited 60 House candidates for the first time. And I can't remember when. I mean, nobody can tell me the last time they had 60 House candidates. So we're challenging them in North Portland, challenging them in deep Eugene, and just saying, you have to be accountable for your record. Will we win all those? No, but challenging them is important because it allows those candidates to be out there and talk about our policies and why our agenda is better than their agenda. So I'll circle that up with the RSLC is Vicki and Tim went over there and met with them. I think it was I started talking to them back in February, and, I know some of the people that work there and started saying, well, I think we got a shot at winning, some seats, some really solid pickups. And they're like, you're tier 3. Like, well, let us know if what you think in a couple of months. So they invited us down to the New Orleans convention down there, and Tim and Vicki just went down there. I had a bunch of meetings with them, and they said, geez, that stuff Bryan's sending us and doing some of our own research, we kind of like you guys. And so they had some meetings, and they moved us to tier 2 and, gave us a little bit of money, some additional resources, start helping with some communication stuff. And then I went with them. We went down to Florida in July and met with them again. And then they kind of rank states all over the country as they either call them holds, so it's where they have a Republican majority, and then they have races that they want to flip chambers. So those are their high target seat states, and then they have ones where they want to just have meaningful gains, right? Just over time, they want to just keep building. And we were able to convince them over the course of the New Orleans one to that July one to move us to tier 1. And that really made a difference in the polling, our quality of candidates, all that sort of stuff. And then that, of course, comes with money and other resources that they bring to bear. And it's pretty awesome to have. So I think in that support you're seeing kind of even today with Zach and the stuff that they do on the comm side of stuff is really kind of help with the messaging. And so it's kind of us, Nevada, Michigan, Minnesota is a tough one, Pennsylvania, so and Colorado. So it's kind of interesting when you put us up with those other states when you're there at those meetings and you're doing a national deal. Like we were just back in Indianapolis right after Labor Day for the last meeting of the year, right? And all of a sudden they kind of got all of the states up there, and you're kind of like, wow, this is kind of like we're in with Nevada as a flippable state. Like we're in with Colorado and Michigan and these these just awesome states that I'm reading about, that are doing things nationally, and we're getting asked, hey, what are you doing different there? What are you guys doing different here? And like sharing that information amongst those people that are in the trenches in their own state is also pretty valuable stuff. So that's why I always think it's great when you're able to go to those conferences and get together with other people in different states, or even if you're an activist in the ORP party, right? And to go into those different things that you can get to and say, gosh, what are you doing to get PCPs recruited in your county, and you just get different ideas, and we got to start doing more of that.
Yeah, I think this is a great year to jump on this wave. I mean, when Bill Kinnemer, the state Senate candidate there in Clackamas, has a "Keep Crime Out of Clackamas" billboard, and it's getting recognized as being the best billboard by the Oregon Catalyst there, because you can run on a theme like that, and it's that straightforward because everybody knows what that means. This is an election cycle. We can do something. By the way, you made mention before we went on that there might be a special guest. I don't know if that special guest is still available, but a lot of folks don't know that Bryan is just only half of the story in the Iverson household. One of the nicest power couples you could ever want to meet is she available, or is
she is? Yes, I think
here we go.
Be more than happy to step on. She's a little bit shorter, so I'll have to tip the camera.
Well, you'll adjust the camera, I'm sure. Representative Iverson, Leader Iverson, welcome to the show. Thank you for just dropping in here at the end as a surprise special guest. How are you doing tonight?
Well, it's busy time out. It is what are we at? 42 days till election. So 42. It is all in on everything to get across the finish line and at least 31 districts so that we can take that majority.
It should be huge, and it's starting to look. I mean, we just heard about the Senate, and I know in some future shows we'll probably do a deep dive on the House and learn what's going on there. But with your leadership, I feel really good about that, especially with the other half of the power couple duo they're consulting, and yeah, exactly. I think you guys are making a big impact on the state, and a lot of folks don't realize sometimes what an immense sacrifice it is to be this involved and be doing this much work. And by the way, you have to have a day job because this is the Oregon State Legislature, right? It doesn't exactly pay the bills.
I'm trying to sell a house to pay for my hobby of being a legislator.
Exactly. Hobby of saving the state from the Democrats. Exactly. That is, it's an important hobby. We're glad you're doing it. And it's really great that you could drop in here and just say a hello here towards the end of the show. Any last words that you just want to share with folks as they figure out what they're going to do? Like, how can they help? I think this probably goes for both the Senate and the House. What can they do to support people and help you guys do what you're trying to accomplish?
100%. We need people to show up. So there is still opportunities to volunteer in the many different campaigns that are across the state. And even if you're in an area where you don't have maybe walkers going out, you've got an opportunity to volunteer through the party to help a district where they're trying to get phone calls done. And I think that we oftentimes we just don't think enough about all those opportunities that are volunteer out there, and we can use those across the state. 42 days, really 41, because today's almost over. And so in conjunction with that last push to get those candidates out there and make sure that people know who they are, it's get out the vote. We got to remember to remind everybody in your neighborhoods, but also across the state, you got to turn in the ballot. And then the last thing, and I don't know if Bryan talked about it yet or not, but there's a real need to, from a local level, start talking about within your own groups how it is that you're going to help that election integrity on election night. So start looking into what is the process that the county clerk has when it comes to picking up ballot boxes and when it comes to accepting which of those ballots are approved for counting, et cetera. And then get involved, because I think that is really a piece that we can do, that we can be part of. Voter integrity is a big conversation, and we're definitely trying to take some bites into it. But immediately, we need to be there and be present on election night to make sure that those ballots are coming in the right way.
And that helps all of the Republican candidates, whether they're running for governor or Congress or state rep or state senate. It's a vital activity, and I think we all know just how important election integrity is, because we've seen what a role it plays in prior elections. So, well, thanks for that kind of final word of what people can do, because one of our previous guests, Jeff Helfrich, running in House District 52, had some interesting stories and some feelings about what happened in a prior election cycle there. His race was extremely close, and you think back, when could I have gotten maybe another 57 votes in and made a difference?
And in this election cycle, where we're playing with a different game, where it's about the postmark date, we need to be really, really watching where those ballot boxes come in and how they're being sorted, and figuring out what the clerk's base is for accepting and looking at those postmark dates, and making sure that those dates, or maybe those envelopes are what is the outside date? How long do we leave those envelopes intact so we have that chain of integrity in the vote? I think that's important.
Well, thank you again for dropping in here at the end of the call and sharing with folks what's going on. And Bryan, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through all those issues and give us the lay of the land with the state senate as well. We are excited, and we're looking forward to. We're probably going to have more candidates on. We're going to have more time to talk about the issues that are shaping the elections. But good luck to everything you guys are doing here, and we look forward to seeing you maybe on a future episode. We would love to do a post-election episode where we get to celebrate.
I will love that. I look forward to that one.
I might be in Mexico, but
there might be a period of us hiding under a rock somewhere, just trying to regroup.
We'll start basketball season, and both boys are in basketball, so I'll be in a gym, hanging out with them, trying to get back to my day job as a dad, right? So while she figures out how to run everything as Speaker of the House, so I'll just be like, well, I'll be back home. Yeah.
Also a very important job, and probably one of the jobs that reminds us why you guys are doing what you're doing. We're trying to make that the kind of place that our kids will grow up and live in and thrive in the future. So, well, thanks again for joining us here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me drop in, guys.
Great having you.
See ya. Take care. Thank you.
And everyone, please share this show with everyone you know, and make sure that they get to see and hear this information, because that's how we spread the word and become even more successful in the future. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow night on another episode of The Captive Audience. I think we're going to probably have Werner Reschke on, and we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff he's up to, as well as what's going on with the Drazen campaign. Have a good night, everyone.